Visual representation of data that describes how the data is related to each other. One of the component is entity. Entity, it can be an object, place, person or a class. What is attribute? Attribute, it describes the properties or characteristics of an entity. How do we connect two entities? We are going to connect two entities, or we describe the relationship through this concept. Dear students, welcome to CS classes. I am Ravi Kumar KR, lecturer in computer science, Vidhyaashram PU College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Friends, let us start our discussion with the topics ER diagram and relationship. So, with respect to database and database management system, let us discuss about these concepts. Now, what is ER diagram? So, ER diagram stands for Entity Relationship Diagram. So, it is a visual representation of data that describes how the data is related to each other. So, this is a diagram we are going to see or describe how data are connected or related to each other. So, now let us see the diagram, and here few definitions. Here, first one is entity. What is an entity? The ER diagram has three main components. One is entity. So, what is entity? It can be any object, place, person or a class. So, look at the diagram here. In ER diagram, student, teacher, project. These two are different entity. So, one of the component, here there are three components. One of the component is entity. Entity, it can be an object, place, person or a class. In this diagram, student, teacher and projects are three entities. And in ER diagram, an entity is represented using rectangles. So, we are going to represent entity through rectangles. Example, in an organization, employee, manager, department, product can be taken as entity from an organization. Here you take an example of any organization. So they will be having different department. One is our employees, he is an employee, and a manager, he is also an employee, and the department and the product, all these we can take as an example for entity. Now look at this diagram. Now see, employee is an entity and this is department. Now this employee, he work for one particular department. So the relationship is, this is the relationship. So this is how we represent entities. Department is one entity and the employee is another entity. We are going to connect these two entities through relationship, that is entity relationship diagram. So here, what is the relation here? This is the relation. Here an employee work for one department. So this is entity. Now let us see the next definition. Next one is attribute. Attribute. What is an attribute? An attribute, it describes the properties or characteristics of an entity. Now we have seen in the previous slide, entity, it is an object. So what is attribute? Attribute, it describes the properties or characteristics of an entity. An attribute is represented using ellipse. So here it is, we are using ellipse here to represent attribute. So this is, for example, in the example here, name, birth, date, student, roll number. Now if you have this is a rectangle, so this is an entity and these all three are attributes represented by using ellipse here. So these are attributes we represent using ellipse. Now examples, for example, name, age and address of a student can be an attributes of an entity student. So if we talk about a student, we are writing student registration, student name, it is his character and his date of birth or maybe his roll number or registration number. All these are attribute of a student. We represent using ellipse. And again, attribute example for employee. If we talk about employee, it is represented using rectangle. It is an entity. And what are the attributes or characteristics of an employee? And here, the name of an employee, ID, employee ID, as well as age of an employee. It can be an attribute of an employee entity. So it is an attribute. Next one is key attribute. Now you know what are attribute. Next one is key attribute. A key attribute represents the main characteristics of an entity, and it usually represent as a primary key in a table. Now we are going to discuss about different types of keys in a database or DBMS. So one of them is primary key. So ellipse with underlying lines represented the key attribute. Here ellipse with underlying lines represent key attribute. So this is key attribute which represent the main characteristics of an employee. Now let us move on to next slide. This is composite attribute. Now an attribute can also have their own attributes. Means an attribute can have its own attributes is called composite attribute. These attributes are known as composite attribute. Look at the example now. Here, address is one character of an entity. If you take example, student is an entity and student address is an attribute, and here this address has different parts. If you look at any address, we have different parts or components of an address. So they are city, state, as well as zip, or this is nothing but PIN number or a PIN code. These are all included in the address. So these are all the different attributes of this attribute address. So this is nothing but composite attribute. Now let us see the next slide. Next we talk about relationship. So in ER diagram, entity relationship diagram. So what we have seen so far is entity. Now let us see what is relationship. So a relationship describes relation between entities. Now how do we connect two entities? We are going to connect two entities, or we describe the relationship through this concept. So we are going to connect two entities through relationships. So it's represented using diamonds or rhombus. Diamonds or rhombus. This is what you have seen in the first example. So this is rhombus. It is used to represent the relationship between two entities. Now in that way we can make out, or we can have three different relationships: binary relationship, recursive, as well as ternary relationship. These relationships are possible between two entities. First one is binary relationship. So what is binary relationship? Binary, it means relationship between only two entities. This is further divided into three types. So first here, let us see what is binary relationship. In binary, the relationship between two entities and only between two entities. So you cannot have more than one entity. We have two entities. Bi stands for two. There should be relationship between only two entities. So look at this example. A and B are the two entities. Now here entity, this one, and this is another entity. We are going to use this rhombus or a diamond shape to represent the relation between two entities. So for example here, student is one entity and the course, and here enrolling. So one student enroll for a course. This is the relation. Enrolling or getting admission to a course is the relationship between student and the course. So this is binary relationship. Under this we have three. 1-to-1 means relationship is rarely seen in the real world. So this is 1-to-1 relationship is one type of binary relationship. Let us move on to next slide. Here one-to-many relationship. Now look at this diagram here. This is 1 to many relationship. If you look at the previous slide here, this is one-to-one relationship. One A is one and B is one entity. Only one relationship between only two entities. But in this one-to-many relationship, we have one entity with many relationships. Now look at this example. It reflects the business rule that one entity is associated with many number of same entity. So one entity is associated with number of other entities or same entity. Now example, a student enroll for only one course but can have many students. Here a course can have many students. Here one student can enroll only for one course, okay, but that is one-to-one relationship. But similarly, a course can have number of students, that is one-to-many relationship. Look at this example now. This is entity relationship. Here again student enroll for course. This is an example for one-to-many, or you can assume like this, one course have many students. That is an example for one-to-many relationship. Now let us go to next slide, and here many-to-many relationship. So this is a diagram here. It represents many students can enroll for more than one course. Please just you can think of this example now. Here many students can enroll for different or many courses is an example for many-to-many. Look at this example here. There are three different. These are the students. If at all these are the courses, then one student can enroll for one. Here there are more than one entity or more than one course. Similarly, this one he can enroll for these two. From here it can have relationship like this. So this is an example for many-to-many relationship, student, courses, and many students and enroll for different courses. So this is many-to-many relationship. Now let us continue our discussion in my next session. Thank you very much.